This child asked for a job. Then the CEO found out the truth about her mom. The office lobby buzzed with the usual Monday morning energy, phones ringing, heels clacking against marble floors, and voices murmuring behind designer glasses and espresso cups. But amidst the flurry of corporate activity, one small figure stood out. A girl no older than 10 stood quietly near the front desk. She wore a faded pink dress, slightly too short at the ankles, and her curly hair was tied back in a loose ponytail. In her hands, she clutched a wrinkled envelope, her fingers fidgeting with the edges. Marissa, the receptionist, blinked in surprise. "Sweetheart, are you lost?" The girl shook her head firmly. "No, ma'am. I'm here to apply for a job." Marissa blinked again, leaning forward. "A job? Honey, this is a corporate office. We don't hire, well, children." "I know," the girl said, standing straighter. "But I need to see the CEO, please. I wrote him a letter." Upstairs, Alexander Quinn, the 43-year-old CEO of Quinn Enterprises, was beginning his morning just like any other. Coffee black, inbox overflowing, and his assistant rattling off the day's schedule. Alexander was sharp, no-nonsense, and famously unemotional. His company built sustainable tech solutions for urban development, and he had no time for sentimentality. At least, not anymore. But when Marissa called and said there was a little girl insisting on seeing him, and that she'd written him a letter, something in her tone made him pause. "Send it up," he said with a sigh. The envelope arrived on his desk within minutes. It was addressed in careful, uneven handwriting. He opened it slowly, expecting a school project or a prank, but as he read the words, his brow furrowed. "Dear Mr. Quinn, my name is Lila. I am 10 years old. I need a job because my mom is sick. She can't work right now. I'm really good at cleaning and organizing. I can even use Excel a little bit. Please give me a chance. I'll work very hard. I don't want to lose our home. Sincerely, Lila Mendez." Alexander reread the name. Mendez. A faint bell rang in the back of his mind, but he couldn't place it. Still, something about the letter made his chest tighten. He stood, eyes distant. "Where is she now?" he asked his assistant. "Downstairs, still waiting." He hesitated for only a moment, then headed toward the elevator. As the doors closed around him, he couldn't shake the strange pull in his chest. Something about that name, something about that girl. When the doors opened and he saw Lila standing in the lobby, small, determined, and heartbreakingly serious, Alexander Quinn felt the first crack in his carefully constructed world. "Lila Mendez," he said softly. "Tell me about your mum." Lila looked up at him with eyes that held too much weight for someone her age. "Her name is Sophia Mendez. You used to know her." Alexander's breath caught. The name Sophia Mendez hit him like a sudden wind. He hadn't heard that name in over a decade. He took a step back, scanning the child's face. There was something eerily familiar in the arch of her eyebrows, the way her chin lifted defiantly when she spoke. He gestured toward the waiting area. "Come, sit." Lila followed him cautiously, her small hands gripping the straps of a worn backpack. They sat opposite each other, the high-rise lobby suddenly feeling too quiet, too exposed. "How do I know your mum?" Alexander asked gently, though his voice had an edge of urgency. Lila opened her backpack and pulled out a photo, creased but still vivid. It showed a young woman, perhaps in her 20s, laughing on a beach with the sun behind her. Alexander's heart stopped. He knew that face. Sophia. It was her. She hadn't changed much in his memory. Same soft brown eyes, same smile that once disarmed even his most stubborn defenses. "You knew her a long time ago," Lila said, watching his reaction closely. "She said she worked here. A long time before I was born." Alexander's mind raced. Sophia Mendez. Yes, she'd been a promising intern, vibrant and full of ideas. They had shared late-night project sessions, coffee breaks that stretched into something more. It had been brief, complicated, and then she was gone. He hadn't thought about her in years, hadn't let himself. "I remember her," he finally said, voice hoarse. "But why didn't she come herself?" "She's sick," Lila replied. "Real sick. She has something with her lungs. She can't talk too much without coughing. Alexander leaned back, trying to process the sudden flood of memories and emotions. And your father? Where is he? Lila shrugged, her gaze dropping to her lap. I don't know. Mom never talks about him. She said he left before I was born. The words struck him like a blade. He glanced again at the photo, then at Lila. Could it be? Was it possible? He studied her more closely now. The deep brown eyes, the dimple on her left cheek, the stubborn set of her jaw. Things he hadn't noticed until now seemed to rise to the surface with cruel clarity. Lila, how old are you exactly? I turned 10 in May, she said simply. 10. That was the same summer Sophia had vanished from the company. No goodbyes, no explanation. Just a short resignation email and then silence. Alexander's chest tightened. Where do you live? In Eastlake, Lila replied. Apartment 304. It's not far, but we might not stay long if we can't pay this month. He stood up abruptly. I'm taking you home. Lila hesitated. But what about the job? We'll talk about it later, he said. Right now, I need to see your mother. The drive to Eastlake was quiet. Lila sat in the front seat, her small hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes flickering to the window. Alexander stole glances at her when he could. Every detail, the curve of her cheek, the way she chewed her lip when deep in thought, was another thread pulling him back through time. Eastlake was a far cry from the sleek world of Quinn Enterprises. The buildings were old, paint peeling from the balconies, laundry swaying from thin clotheslines. He parked outside a narrow apartment complex with rusty railings and a cracked sidewalk. This is it, Lila said softly. They climbed the stairs in silence, each footstep echoing in the cramped corridor. When they reached apartment 304, Lila knocked lightly. There was a pause, then the sound of someone coughing, a dry, painful cough that made Alexander flinch. The door creaked open slowly. Sofia Mendez stood on the other side, pale and thinner than he remembered, wrapped in a worn cardigan. Her eyes, though tired, widened in stunned recognition the moment she saw him. Alex, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. He stared at her, disbelief and something deeper flooding his expression. Sophia. Lila looked between them, confused. You know each other? Sophia leaned against the doorframe, clutching her side as another cough rattled through her. What are you doing here? Your daughter came to my office asking for a job, he said, his voice rough. She wrote me a letter. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Lila, then back at Alexander. I told her not to. She told me your name, that she didn't know her father, that you were sick. Sophia's expression twisted with guilt. She turned and walked shakily back into the apartment. Come in, she said, her voice strained. The place was small, but neat. A few drawings taped to the walls, a blanket folded carefully over the couch. Alexander sat slowly, taking it all in. Lila went to the kitchenette, poured her mother a glass of water without being asked, then sat quietly nearby. You disappeared, Alexander said after a moment. One day you were there, and the next, gone. No message, no explanation. I had my reasons, Sophia said quietly. Does one of those reasons weigh 10 years old and sit across from me? Sophia's eyes met his. Yes. The silence that followed was deafening. She's mine? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Sophia nodded, her hands trembling. I didn't know how to tell you, and when I finally thought about it, it felt too late. I didn't want to disrupt your life. I didn't want her to feel unwanted. Alexander leaned forward, his voice low but intense. She's not unwanted, she never was. But I needed to know, Sophia. I deserved to know. Sophia's eyes brimmed with tears again. I'm sorry, Alex. I was scared. Then Lila, small and serious, asked the question neither had prepared for. Are you my dad? Alexander's breath caught again, and this time there was nowhere to run. Lila's voice was soft, but her eyes locked onto his with fierce, trembling hope. The weight of the moment settled between them like thick fog. He turned to Sophia, as if silently asking for permission. She nodded once, slowly. "Yes," he said finally, his voice husky. "I believe I am." Lila didn't move. She just stared at him, absorbing the words, her lips parting slightly as if she'd been waiting her entire life to hear them without even knowing. Then, quietly, she asked, "Why didn't you come for us?" Alexander's jaw clenched. "I didn't know about you, Lila. Your mom, she didn't tell me." "But you were friends," Lila said, confusion furrowing her brow. "We were more than friends," Sophia said gently, before glancing away. "But life got complicated. And I made choices I thought were best at the time." Lila looked at Alexander again. "So what happens now?" He didn't have an answer. Not a clean one. This wasn't a boardroom decision or a quarterly report. This was a decade of missed birthdays, of bedtime stories unsaid, of questions unanswered. And yet somehow, this tiny human, his daughter, was sitting here in front of him, giving him a second chance he didn't deserve. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I want to be part of your life. If you'll let me." Sophia closed her eyes. The silence was thick again, but not angry, heavy with feeling, with regret, with the delicate start of something new. "I don't want her working to keep a roof over your heads," Alexander added, turning to Sophia. "You should have come to me." "I was ashamed," Sophia whispered. "We were doing okay until I got sick. Then everything spiraled. I didn't want your pity, or worse, to have you resent us." "I don't pity you," he said, his voice low. "And I would never have resented my child." He stood and paced the room slowly, trying to keep his emotions in check. "You said she turned 10 in May. Her birthday." "What day?" "May 14th, Sophia answered. Alexander's eyes flickered. "That was the day of the investor summit. I remember because I left work early that afternoon. I kept thinking something was missing. Now I know what." Lila got up and walked over to him, hesitant. She held out her small hand. He looked at it like it was the most fragile thing in the world. Then he knelt and took it. "I'm sorry I wasn't there, Lila, but I want to be now. If you'll let me." She nodded, swallowing hard. "Okay." Sophia looked away, wiping her tears silently. But even in the pain, there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Relief. Just then, a knock came at the door. 3 loud, deliberate knocks. Sophia stiffened. Her eyes darted toward the window, her hands clutching the edge of the couch. "Don't answer it," she whispered. "Please." Alexander looked at her, alarm rising. "Who is it?" Sophia didn't answer. Alexander's instincts sharpened instantly. He rose to his feet, placing himself between the door and Sophia and Lila. The knock came again, louder this time. 3 slow pounds that echoed through the tiny apartment like thunder. Lila clutched her mother's sleeve. "Sophia," Alexander said calmly but firmly, "tell me who that is." She looked terrified, her face pale. "His name is Leon. He's our landlord. But he's not just that. He's dangerous." Another knock, then a voice, muffled, deep and threatening. "Sophia, I know you're in there. You're 2 weeks late again. We had a deal." Alexander moved toward the door, but Sophia rushed up and grabbed his arm. "No, don't open it, please. He's not just after money. He's threatened me before. When he drinks, he gets violent." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Has he ever hurt you?" Sophia hesitated. "No, but he's tried to push his way in. Last week I had to block the door with a chair. He said next time he wouldn't knock." Lila's eyes were wide with fear. "Mom," Alexander had heard enough. "We're not staying here." "But..." "No," he said, already pulling out his phone. "You're coming with me, tonight. I'll have someone pack your things later. But I'm not letting either of you stay another minute in this place." Sophia looked torn, but one look at Lila made her nod. "Okay." Alexander dialed a number. "Martin, I need security at Eastlake Apartments, now, and send a driver. I'm taking someone out of here." He turned to Sophia. Is there a back exit? She nodded. Through the laundry room down the hall. He moved quickly, guiding them toward the hallway, just as another loud bang echoed through the apartment. Leon had begun kicking the door. "Open up or I swear I'll—" The three of them slipped out the back as quietly as possible, Sophia leaning on Alexander's arm, Lila clutching her backpack. They moved down the back stairs, breathless and tense, until they emerged into the narrow alley behind the building. Minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up. The driver jumped out, opening the back door. "Mr. Quinn?" "Yes," Alexander said. "Get them out of here. Take us to the North Lake residence." As they climbed in, Sophia looked back at the apartment complex, her face shadowed by emotion. "What am I doing?" she whispered. "This is your world, Alex. I don't belong in it." He turned to her, his expression fierce and soft at once. "You belong in my world because Lila belongs in it. And because whether you want to believe it or not, you always have." As the car pulled away, Lila sat between them, her head resting against Sophia's shoulder, her tiny hand still wrapped around Alexander's fingers. For a moment, there was peace. But back at the apartment, the front door splintered inward under Leon's final kick, and when he saw the place empty, photo frames missing, blankets gone, his face twisted with rage. He pulled out his phone. "Yeah, she ran," he growled. "Tell the boss we've got a problem." The North Lake residence stood like a fortress of modern luxury, a sprawling estate perched on the edge of the lake, all glass walls and clean lines, its silence broken only by the sound of gentle water lapping the shore. As the car rolled into the circular driveway, Lila pressed her face to the window in awe. She'd never seen anything like it. Inside, the staff had already prepared a guest room on the second floor, with soft linens, warm lighting, and a view of the lake that seemed to stretch forever. Alexander guided them through the house, his hand gently supporting Sophia's back as she walked, weak from the stress and illness. "I'll have a doctor come in the morning," he said. "Someone I trust. Discreet." Sophia nodded, overwhelmed. "This is too much, Alex." "No," he said firmly. "It's the least I can do." Lila wandered into the room beside them, her eyes lighting up at the sight of the bed covered in plush pillows. She touched the edge of the window frame, then looked at him. "This is like a palace." Alexander knelt beside her. "It's your home now, as long as you want it to be." She looked unsure. "Even if I don't know what to call you yet." He smiled softly. "You can call me Alex for now, or whatever makes you comfortable." She nodded, thoughtful. "Okay, Alex." That night after dinner, a simple meal prepared by the house chef at Alexander's request, Lila fell asleep on the oversized couch, curled up with a blanket and a book she had found in the library. Sophia stood nearby, watching her with eyes full of love and worry. "She's strong," Alexander said, approaching quietly. "You've done a remarkable job with her." Sophia didn't look at him. "I tried, but now I feel like I've failed." "You didn't. You protected her. You made hard choices. I may not agree with all of them, but I can see they came from love." She looked up at him, weary. "You're being kinder than I expected." "I'm being honest," he said. 10 years ago, we weren't ready. But now, I can't pretend this didn't happen, that she's not mine." Sophia took a deep breath. "What do you want from us?" He looked her in the eyes. "I want time, to get to know her, to help you, to fix what I can, even if it's not everything." Sophia studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay, we can try." They stood in silence, watching their daughter sleep, the distant sound of crickets filling the space between them. But miles away, in a smoky office above a pawn shop in Eastlake, a man with cold eyes and a jagged scar across his cheek listened to Leon's report. When he heard the name Alexander Quinn, his expression changed. "Quinn," he muttered. "Now that's interesting." He picked up a file from his desk. On the front, Sophia Mendez, debt records. And beneath it, a much older photo, Sophia. And next to her, A man who wasn't Alexander. The next morning dawned with golden light spilling across the North Lake estate. Lila awoke slowly, blinking at the unfamiliar softness of the bed, the quiet serenity of a home without sirens or shouting neighbors. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel afraid to open her eyes. Downstairs, Alexander was already awake, seated on the patio with his laptop closed beside him and a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. He wasn't looking at the water. He was thinking. When Sophia joined him, wrapped in a thick shawl, he stood. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," she admitted, sitting carefully. "But safe." "That's something," he replied. A moment later, Lila appeared in the doorway, her curls wild from sleep, her eyes squinting in the sunlight. "Morning." Alexander smiled and motioned her over. "Hungry?" She nodded and he walked with her to the kitchen, where a breakfast of fresh fruit, eggs and toast was already laid out. As she ate, he poured her a glass of juice and asked, "Do you like school?" Lila hesitated. "I like learning, but I had to stop going when Mom got worse. We couldn't afford everything anymore. I've been helping out at home." Alexander's stomach twisted. He glanced at Sophia, who said softly, "She was homeschooled when I could manage it, but this past year we fell behind." "We'll fix that," he said gently. "Private tutors, the best teachers, whatever she needs." Sophia's eyes glistened. "You don't have to." "I want to," Alexander interrupted. "She's my daughter." Lila looked up. "Can I visit your office one day? I still want to learn how to work in a place like that." He smiled. "You can visit any time. And if you still want a job when you're older, there'll always be a place for you." As they spoke, a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. Alexander's doctor, a discreet woman in her 50s named Dr. Fallon, stepped out and approached the house with a medical bag in hand. The examination was quiet but thorough. Afterward, Dr. Fallon spoke to Alexander privately. "She's very sick," she said. "Early stages of pulmonary fibrosis. Likely stress-induced, aggravated by poor living conditions." "Is it treatable?" "With the right care, yes, but she needs to rest, no stress, no pressure, and she needs medication that doesn't come cheap." "She'll have it," Alexander said immediately, "whatever it costs." Dr. Fallon nodded. "Good, because without it, she might not have more than a few years." Alexander's face darkened. The idea of Lila growing up without her mother, again, made something cold and furious rise in him. "Thank you, Doctor. I'll make arrangements today." As Dr. E. Fallon left, Alexander walked back inside and looked at Sophia, who was sitting on the couch with Lila curled up beside her. He saw the faint tremble in her hands and the fear she tried to hide behind her eyes. He wouldn't let this be the end. But just as he made that promise silently to himself, his phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "Unknown number. You took something that wasn't yours. Time to pay up, Quinn." Alexander stared at the message, his mind whirring. The wording was vague, but the timing wasn't. He walked swiftly to his study, locking the door behind him. On his secure laptop, he began tracing the number. It bounced through 2 proxy servers, both routed through Eastlake, definitely not random. He picked up his phone and called Martin, his head of security. "I need you to run a trace on an encrypted message I just received. It's connected to Sofia Mendez, and I want background checks on anyone who's been contacting her in the last year." "You think it's connected to the landlord?" Martin asked. "I think it's bigger than that," Alexander replied. Meanwhile, in the main living room, Sophia sat quietly, watching Lila color with soft pastels on a coffee table. She wanted to freeze this moment, her daughter safe, surrounded by peace and light. But in the back of her mind, the fear never really left. It crouched there, waiting, reminding her of all the shadows she'd run from. Lila looked up. "Mom, can I show Alex my drawing when he comes back?" Sophia smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Of course, baby." Upstairs, Alexander's laptop dinged with results. Martin had uncovered more than expected. Leon, the landlord, wasn't just an aggressive rent collector. He worked for a man named Dante Reyes, a loan shark who ran a tight underground network in Eastlake. Sophia's name was on one of Reyes's ledgers, $10,000 borrowed, interest compounding weekly. But that wasn't the worst part. Attached to Sophia's file was an old photo, her and Reyes, smiling, close. Alexander sat back in his chair, stunned. He immediately picked up his phone and called Sophia's number, but she didn't answer. He tried the house line. Nothing. Heart pounding, he ran down the hall and burst into the living room. Lila looked up in surprise. "Hi. Where's your mum?" he asked urgently. Lila pointed to the guest bathroom. He knocked once, then twice. "Sophia, are you okay?" No response. He opened the door. Empty. The window above the sink was open. Alexander's stomach dropped. He turned to Lila. "Did she say anything before she went in there?" "She looked sad," Lila said quietly. "She kissed my forehead and said she loved me." Alexander's pulse roared in his ears. He ran to the security monitors. The feed showed Sophia leaving through the back garden entrance just 10 minutes ago, her shawl wrapped tight around her, and a taxi pulling up before she disappeared inside. He grabbed his phone. "Track that cab, now. I need to know where she's going." Lila stood in the doorway, trembling. "Is she leaving us?" "No," Alexander said, kneeling in front of her. "She's not leaving you. I promise. I'll find her. I'll bring her back." Lila bit her lip, trying to be brave. "You promise?" "I swear." But deep down, Alexander feared the truth. Sophia hadn't just gone for air. She was running. Again. The cab wound through the congested heart of Eastlake, Sophia clutching her coat tighter with each passing block. She hadn't planned this. She hadn't meant to leave. But the message had shaken her to her core. They had found her. And worse, they now knew about Alexander. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, but she didn't answer. Alexander would be furious, hurt, but she had to end this on her own. She had to protect Lila. The cab stopped 2 blocks from a crumbling warehouse marked only by faded graffiti and a rusted-out fire escape. Sophia stepped out and hesitated for a moment. Her lungs burned slightly as she walked, each breath more difficult than the last. She was getting worse. She could feel it. Inside, the warehouse was dim and cold. Sophia's footsteps echoed on the concrete floor as she stepped into the cavernous space. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and broad, with a thin scar along his cheek. Dante Reyes. He smiled without warmth. "Well, look who finally decided to come home." "I came to talk," Sophia said, her voice steady, "not to beg." "Oh, you're not begging yet," he said, circling her slowly. "But you will. Because you didn't just disappear. You took something. Or rather, someone. I didn't take anything. I left." He stopped in front of her. "You left with my child, Sophia." Her breath caught. You are not her father. Biology's a funny thing," he sneered. "We both know what happened 10 years ago. I raised questions. You ran. But now? She's living in a mansion with Alexander Quinn. That's leverage I didn't have before." Sophia stepped back, her voice low. "If you touch her, if you go near her—" "Relax," Dante said. "I don't want the kid. She's more useful where she is. But you owe me." "I'll pay you," Sophia said quickly. "Whatever you want. Just leave her out of this." "I don't want your money," he said. "I want you to do something for me." Sophia stiffened. "What?" He handed her a small black flash drive. "Alexander Quinn's company is developing something new, something big. You used to work there. You still know the systems. I want you to get me access to their internal server." "No," she said instantly. "I won't betray him." "Then say goodbye to your daughter's new fairy tale, because if I don't get what I want, I'll tear down everything he's built. I'll make sure she grows up with nothing, and I'll make sure she watches you suffer." Sophia's hands trembled. She looked down at the drive, then back at Dante. "I need time." "You have 48 hours, he said. "And Sophia? Don't try to be clever. I'll be watching." She turned and walked out, legs shaking. Back at the Northlake estate, Alexander's team had tracked the cab to Eastlake. He was already on his way, fury boiling in his chest. But he wasn't prepared for what he'd find. The SUV tore through Eastlake's winding streets, Alexander at the wheel with Martin beside him, eyes on the tracker blinking on the dashboard. The address was clear, an abandoned warehouse near the old rail yard. Alexander's mind spun with questions. Why here, why now, and most of all, why alone? As they approached, Martin reached for his sidearm. "You sure you want to go in without backup?" Alexander didn't hesitate. "If she's inside, I'm going in." The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows shattered and its door ajar. Alexander pushed it open with one hand, the hinges groaning. Inside, the shadows clung to the walls like secrets. Then faint footsteps echoed. Sophia emerged from the darkness, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Their eyes locked. "What the hell are you doing here?" Alexander demanded, crossing the space in long strides. "You left without a word." "Do you know what that did to Lila?" Sophia looked exhausted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had to. I couldn't let him drag you into this." "Who?" he snapped. "Who's dragging us into what?" She hesitated, then pulled the flash drive from her pocket and placed it in his palm. "His name is Dante Reyes. I borrowed money from him a year ago when I got sick. I thought I could pay it back, but the debt grew. And now he wants this. Access to your company's files." Alexander stared at the drive. "Industrial espionage?" She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "He threatened to expose Lila, said she was his, but she's not. She's yours." The words pierced through him like lightning. "He said that? That he's her father? I don't know if he believes it, or if he's just using it to control me. But I took the test, Alex. I did years ago. She's yours. She always was." Alexander's chest rose and fell, rage and something deeper burning in him. "He threatened you? And Lila?" "Yes." "Then we end this," he said, stepping closer. "We go to the police, we file charges, we bring everything we have. You're not alone anymore." Sophia's legs gave out slightly, and he caught her, steadying her in his arms. "You shouldn't have had to face this by yourself," he whispered. "Not again." She looked up at him, her face pale. "I didn't want to lose you." "You won't," he said firmly. "Not now. Not ever." But as they stepped out into the fading daylight, a black car parked across the street slowly rolled down its window. Inside, Dante watched through tinted sunglasses, a smirk playing at his lips. "She chose him," he muttered. Then he turned to the man beside him. "Well then, let's see what she chooses when I take the one thing neither of them can afford to lose." The man beside him glanced up. "The girl?" Dante smiled coldly. "Bring me Lila." Back at the Northlake estate, the evening air was thick with quiet as Lila sat curled on the living room couch, her eyes fixed on the front door. Hours had passed since Alexander left to find her mother, and though the staff tried to comfort her, nothing could calm the growing unease in her chest. "Do you think they're okay?" she asked the housekeeper Mira, who was bringing her a cup of tea. "I'm sure they are, sweetheart," Mira said gently. "Mister. Quinn is doing everything to keep you both safe." Lila tried to smile, but it faltered. Her fingers tightened around the soft blanket on her lap. The house suddenly felt too big, too quiet, too far away from the world she'd known all her life. Upstairs, one of the exterior security cameras blinked red, a signal that something wasn't right. But the motion alert went unnoticed by the staff, buried beneath routine notifications. In the shadows near the perimeter fence, two figures moved silently, dressed in black, communicating through subtle gestures. Inside the estate, Lila turned off the TV and walked to the glass doors that opened onto the back patio. The lake shimmered under the moonlight. It looked peaceful, like nothing bad could ever touch them here. That illusion shattered with a sharp sound, a knock at the front entrance. She rushed to the door, her heart leaping. "Mom?" She pulled it open just slightly, only to see a man in a delivery uniform standing there holding a small clipboard. "Delivery for Mr. Quinn," he said, his tone too casual, too smooth. Lila blinked. "He's not home right now." "That's okay." the man said, flashing a grin. "Can you just sign right here?" She hesitated, then stepped forward, just a bit. That's when she saw it. The glint of something shiny beneath his jacket. Not a clipboard at all. Not a delivery. Her instincts screamed. She slammed the door shut just as the man lunged, the heavy lock clicking into place seconds before he crashed against it with his shoulder. Mira screamed from the hallway, grabbing the house phone, dialing security. But the other intruder was already at the side entrance, using tools to override the code. Within seconds, the alarm system shut down with a low beep. "Lila, run!" Mira shouted, but Lila was already moving. She darted up the stairs, her heart hammering in her chest, the sound of heavy footsteps following too closely behind. In the master suite, she slammed the door, locked it, and looked around for a hiding place. Her eyes settled on the large wardrobe. She scrambled inside, pulling the doors closed just as she heard the bedroom door crash open. Boots stepped across the room. Slow, deliberate. And then a voice she didn't recognize, calm and terrifying. "Come out, little girl. I'm not here to hurt you." She pressed her hands over her mouth, trying not to breathe. Below, Mira's cries echoed through the house. And outside, Alexander's car screeched into the driveway. Too late. Alexander burst through the front doors, his eyes immediately locking on the chaos. The house alarm was disabled. Mira was huddled by the stairs, shaken and clutching her arm. His heart sank like a stone. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Upstairs!" Mira cried. They came in through both doors, 2 men. One went up. Alexander didn't wait for more. He took the stairs 3 at a time, pulling the small firearm from the drawer in the entry console as he moved. His mind wasn't just racing, it was roaring. Lila, Sophia. He couldn't lose either of them. He reached the master suite and saw the door smashed in. Inside, drawers were pulled open, blankets strewn across the floor, signs of a hurried search. But no Lila. The wardrobe. Alexander moved quietly to the side and yanked it open. Empty. A click behind him made him spin. The man was tall, built like a bouncer, with icy calm in his demeanor. He had a taser in one hand and a radio in the other. "Looking for someone?" the man said. Alexander didn't hesitate. He surged forward, tackling the intruder hard. The taser fired wide, missing him by inches. They crashed into the nightstand, shattering the lamp. The man landed a punch, but Alexander drove a knee into his ribs, sending him stumbling back. He raised the gun. "Where is she?" the man sneered. "Gone. Already on her way to the boss." Rage overtook Alexander. He stepped forward, his voice thunderous. "You tell me where she is, or I swear—" A second later, Martin appeared at the door, gun drawn. "Drop it." The man hesitated just long enough for Alexander to strike. The blow knocked the radio from his hand, sending it skidding across the floor. Martin moved fast, cuffing him before he could recover. Alexander turned, his face pale. "Lila's gone. He said they took her." Martin's eyes darkened. "We'll trace the radio. Might have coordinates. And I'll get the driveway footage. If she left in a vehicle, we'll find it." "Now," Alexander growled. "Every second counts." Downstairs, Mira sat trembling, tears streaking her cheeks. She tried to run. "She was so brave, Mr. Quinn, but they were too fast." Alexander's stomach churned. He walked over to the control panel and rewound the security feed. There it was, a black van pulling away from the house. Inside, Lila's terrified face barely visible through the tinted glass. He stared at the screen, his jaw locked. "They want leverage," Martin said. "This isn't just revenge, it's a message." Alexander nodded. "Then here's my answer." He turned, eyes burning. "Mobilize everything." "No police, not yet. Dante Reyes started this war." "And we're ending it?" Martin asked. Alexander clenched his fists. "No, I'm going to burn it to the ground." Lila sat in the back of the van, wrists loosely tied, her heart pounding as she stared out through the narrow slits of the windows. The interior smelled of gasoline and cold metal. One of the men sat across from her, arms crossed, his face unreadable behind dark glasses. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She remembered what her mom had always said, "When you're scared, stay quiet, think, watch." So she watched. Every turn, every street sign. She counted minutes in her head, mentally mapping their route. The van stopped suddenly. The man stood and opened the door, nodding to someone outside. Another figure stepped in, Dante Reyes. He knelt before her with a patronizing smile. "Lila, that's your name, right?" She didn't answer. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, brushing a curl from her face. "But I do need your help." Still, she said nothing. Dante chuckled. "You've got fire in you, just like your mom." At that, Lila's eyes narrowed. "She's the reason you're here," he continued, pacing slowly. "She took something that belonged to me." Then she ran to Mr. Alexander Quinn, thinking he could protect her, thinking he could protect you. "Alex is my dad," Lila said quietly. Dante paused. "Is he? Are you sure about that?" "I don't care what you say," she replied. "He came for us." "You didn't," he laughed, not kindly. "You're smart, I can see that, but you'll learn soon that loyalty has a cost." He turned to one of the men. "Take her inside. Set her up in the back room. Nothing rough. We want her clean and calm when the message goes out." Lila's stomach twisted at the phrase. She was led through the back entrance of an old textile mill, long abandoned with flickering lights and cracked windows. The room they put her in had a thin mattress and a single chair. No locks on the inside. Once alone, she took a deep breath and slipped off the bracelet Alex had given her that morning. A small, simple thing, embedded with a GPS chip. She placed it behind the metal pipe near the floor. Think, watch, wait. Meanwhile, at the North Lake estate, Alexander was already pulling up satellite footage and location data. The chip in the bracelet pinged once, then went dark. "She's alive," Martin confirmed. "Last signal came from a warehouse district near Riverbend." Then it cut. Alexander's hands were steady, but his voice was low and deadly. "They're hiding her. We've got eyes in the area. Want me to send a team?" "No," Alexander said. "I'm going in myself." Martin hesitated. "Alone?" "She's my daughter." Sophia appeared behind them, pale but determined. "Then I'm coming too." Alexander turned slowly. "You're not strong enough." "I don't care," she said, eyes burning. "This is my fight too." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Let's bring our girl home." The black SUV rolled through Riverbend under cover of night, headlights off, engine low. Alexander sat behind the wheel, face set in grim determination. Beside him, Sophia clutched a small tablet connected to the last GPS ping from Lila's bracelet. Though her illness still wore on her body, her spirit was steel. "There," she whispered, pointing to the map. "That's where the signal dropped, the old East End mill." Alexander nodded. "We go in, find her, get out, fast. If Dante's there, I'll handle him." Sophia didn't argue. She knew better than anyone how much was at stake. They parked behind a row of rusted trucks and slipped through the shadows toward the rear entrance. The mill loomed like a sleeping beast, windows boarded, graffiti covering the brick. The smell of mildew and oil clung to the air. Inside, the echo of distant footsteps guided them down a dark hallway. Alexander held up a hand, signaling stop. A voice was coming from a room ahead. "She's just a kid. What if Quinn doesn't bite?" "He'll bite," another voice growled. "He thinks she's his. That's all that matters." Alexander's jaw tightened. Sophia reached into her coat and pulled out a small vial, a sedative she'd brought just in case. "Plan?" she whispered. He looked at her. "You get to Lila. I draw them away." Before she could protest, he moved. Swift and silent, Alexander stepped into the hallway and kicked a metal bin across the floor. The noise startled the guards. They rushed toward the sound and straight into Alexander's ambush. 2 blows, 1 man down. Another tried to raise a weapon, but Sophia appeared behind him, slamming the vial into his neck. He crumpled. Alexander turned to her, impressed. "Remind me not to make you mad." She gave a breathless smile. "Come on." They followed a narrow corridor into the back of the mill. The door at the end was slightly ajar. Sophia stepped forward and pushed it open slowly. Inside, Lila sat on the mattress, knees drawn up, staring at the floor. She looked up at the sound of the door, and her eyes widened. "Mom! Alex!" Sophia ran to her, dropping to her knees. Lila flung herself into her mother's arms, sobbing. Alexander stepped in and wrapped them both in his arms. "You came," Lila whispered. "I knew you would." "We're here, baby," Sophia said, kissing her head. "We've got you." But their moment shattered with the click of a gun. Dante stood at the threshold, his weapon raised, flanked by two more of his men. "Tender," he sneered. "Touching." Alexander stood, shielding them. "Let her go, Reyes. It's over." "No," Dante said. "It's just getting started. You cost me, Quinn, and now you're going to pay." He raised the gun. A shot rang out, and Dante collapsed to the floor. Behind him stood Martin, weapon smoking, calm and precise. "Thought you might need backup," he said. Alexander let out a breath. Perfect timing. But one of Dante's men was still reaching for a weapon, aiming it at Sophia. Lila screamed. Everything slowed in that instant, the scream tearing from Lila's throat, the metallic flash of the gun turning toward Sophia, the seconds stretching as fear took over every heartbeat in the room. Alexander didn't think. He moved. He lunged in front of Sophia just as the gun went off. The bullet hit him square in the shoulder. The impact drove him back, sending him crashing to the floor with a grunt of pain. Sophia screamed, throwing herself over his body. Lila clung to her mother's side, sobbing, "No, no, no!" Martin fired again, dropping the last gunman in one clean shot. Then he rushed forward, ripping off his jacket to press it against Alexander's wound. "Stay with me, boss," he growled. "You're gonna be fine." Alexander's face was pale, his jaw clenched against the pain. Blood seeped through his shirt, warm and fast, but his eyes locked onto Lila's, and he managed a faint smile. "You okay, sweetheart?" Lila nodded through her tears. "You saved us." "That's what dads do," he whispered. Sophia's hands trembled as she held his other hand. "Don't you dare die on me, Alex." "I'm not going anywhere," he said, voice rasping. "Not now. Not ever." Sirens began to wail in the distance. Martin had already sent the silent alert. Reinforcements, paramedics, the police, they were coming. Lila looked around at the chaos, the bodies, the blood, and yet somehow, amidst it all, she felt safe. Because her mother was alive. Because Alexander had come. Because he'd taken a bullet for them. Minutes later, the paramedics arrived and began treating Alexander immediately. As they worked, Sophia and Lila stayed by his side. When the stretcher was loaded into the ambulance, Lila climbed in without hesitation. "I'm riding with you," she said fiercely. Sophia followed, her hand never leaving Alexander's. Martin stood behind, watching the vehicle pull away, then turned toward the mill. Police lights flashed, crime scene tape was already being set. Dante Reyes was still breathing, barely, and cuffed to a gurney. The end of his reign. Back at the hospital, Alexander was rushed into surgery. Hours passed, a blur of white walls and worried pacing. Sophia sat in the waiting room with Lila curled beside her. Every time a nurse passed, she looked up, hope and dread warring in her chest. Finally, the surgeon appeared. "He's stable," the woman said with a smile. "Clean entry and exit. No vital organs hit. He's very lucky." Sophia broke into tears, relief overtaking her. Lila squeezed her hand tightly, whispering, "He's coming back." They were allowed to see him an hour later. He was groggy, but awake, and smiling. "Hey," he murmured. Sophia leaned over him. "You scared me." "Scared myself a little," he admitted, "but it was worth it." Lila climbed up gently beside him, nestling against his good side. "We're safe now." He looked at them both, his eyes filling with emotion. "Yeah, we are." But across town, in a quiet hospital room under a different name, Dante Reyes opened his eyes, his lips curled into a faint smile, because he still had one more secret left to play. 1 week later, the North Lake estate was slowly beginning to feel like a home again. The wounds, both physical and emotional, were still fresh, but the tension that once filled every corner had begun to ease. Lila was back in her room, surrounded by books and art supplies. Sophia spent her mornings on the back patio, wrapped in a blanket, finally allowing herself to rest. And Alexander, though still healing, had refused to slow down. "You were shot," Sophia reminded him, watching him limp slightly across the kitchen. "And you were nearly blackmailed into espionage," he said with a half smile. "We're both recovering. Some more stubbornly than others." He reached for her hand. "I can't sit still. Not when I know it's not over." Sophia's eyes darkened. "You think Dante's still a threat?" "I know he is," Alexander said. "Men like that don't stop, especially when they lose." Sophia nodded slowly, her mind drifting back to the moment in the warehouse, the calm in Dante's face, even when everything fell apart. It wasn't defeat, it was patience. Alexander glanced toward the other room where Lila was sketching. "I don't want her looking over her shoulder for the rest of her life." "She won't," Sophia said. "Not if we stand together." Later that day, while Alexander took a call with federal investigators, Lila sat with Sophia in the sunroom. She looked up from her sketchpad, thoughtful. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, baby." "When you found out you were sick, why didn't you tell anyone?" Sophia hesitated. "Because I didn't want anyone to worry, especially you." "But I did worry," Lila said quietly. "I always knew something was wrong." Sophia pulled her close. "I'm sorry. I should have trusted you more." "I'm not mad," Lila said. "I just want to help next time. We're supposed to be a team, right?" Sophia smiled through misty eyes. "Right." Meanwhile, Martin entered Alexander's office, face grim. "We ran a deeper scan on Dante's network. Turns out there's a sealed document he tried to transmit before his arrest, but it never went through." "What kind of document?" Alexander asked, eyes narrowing. "A birth certificate, filed in El Paso, year 2013. Mother, Sofia Mendez." Alexander's heart skipped. "But Lila was born in Eastlake." Martin hesitated. "This certificate lists a different child." The words struck like lightning. Alexander stood slowly. "Another child?" "Yes, a boy." Martin placed the file on the desk. "His name is listed as Leo Mendez, no father's name recorded." Alexander stared at the paper, mind racing. Sophia never said anything. "Maybe she didn't know," Martin said, "or maybe she had a reason not to tell you." Downstairs, Sophia felt a sudden chill. She looked out the window, unease prickling her skin. Because somewhere far away, in a private foster facility tucked in the desert hills of New Mexico, a boy with dark eyes and a familiar dimple in his cheek stared out the window, waiting, wondering, not knowing his family was closer than ever before. Sophia stood on the back patio, arms crossed, as Alexander approached her with the file in hand. The wind stirred softly, lifting the edges of her sweater, but she barely noticed. Her gaze was distant, until she saw his expression. "We need to talk," he said gently. She turned, heart sinking. "What is it?" Alexander handed her the file without a word. As she opened it, her fingers began to tremble. Her eyes moved quickly across the document, then froze on the name. Leo Mendez. Her breath caught. "You know about him," she whispered. Alexander's voice was low. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sophia sat slowly, as if the weight of the memory had suddenly returned. "Because I thought I'd never see him again." She looked up, pain etched deep in her features. "It was just after Lila was born. I was sick, Alex. Sicker than I told anyone. And I didn't know if I was going to make it. Then I found out I was pregnant again, just months later. I had no money, no insurance. The hospital in El Paso said I wasn't strong enough to keep the pregnancy. But you did. I did. Barely. Leo was born early. He was small. They said he might not survive." Her voice cracked. "I had to leave him in state care while I recovered. I thought it would be temporary, just a few weeks. But then Dante found me again. He told me if I didn't walk away, he'd make sure both children disappeared." Alexander's fists clenched at his sides. "So you ran?" "I had to," I didn't know what else to do. I kept Lila safe, but I never stopped thinking about Leo. I tried to find him years later, but there was no trail. It was like he'd vanished into the system. Alexander placed a hand on her shoulder. He's alive. He's in New Mexico, a private foster facility. Sophia gasped. You found him? We found his file. He's under a different name now, Leo Martinez, but the birth certificate is clear. Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks. Does he know anything about me? About Lila? Alexander shook his head. I don't think so, but we can change that. We can bring him home. Sophia covered her face, overwhelmed. I thought I'd lost him forever. Alexander knelt in front of her. You didn't, and we're not letting him grow up thinking no one wanted him. Inside, Lila peeked through the glass doors, sensing something monumental had shifted. She stepped outside quietly. Mom, she asked, what's going on? Sophia reached for her hand, pulling her into her lap. Sweetheart, you have a brother. Lila's eyes widened. A brother? Alexander nodded. His name is Leo, and he's waiting for us. Lila looked between them, a mixture of confusion and hope lighting her face. When are we going? Alexander answered without hesitation. Tomorrow. The plane descended over the arid hills of New Mexico as golden light bathed the mountains in soft hues. From the private jet's window, Lila pressed her nose against the glass, eyes wide with anticipation. She'd barely slept the night before. Her mind had been spinning with questions. What would he look like? Would he remember their mom? Would he like her? Sophia sat beside her, holding her daughter's hand tightly. Her face was pale, the strain of the trip evident in her breath, but her spirit was locked on a singular thought. Leo, the son she thought she had lost, the son she was about to see for the first time in nearly a decade. Alexander stood near the front, speaking with the legal team and the private investigator who had located the boy. He's in a temporary foster care placement run by a private group. He hasn't been adopted yet, but there's a wait list, the lawyer explained. Then we don't have time, Alexander said. I want our petition filed the moment we land. Already in motion, the man assured him. When they arrived, a black SUV drove them through winding desert roads until a modest white stucco building appeared beyond a ridge. Children played in a dusty courtyard, their laughter echoing faintly. The facility looked clean, well-maintained, but impersonal. Inside the front office, the staff greeted them with polite professionalism. We've kept Leo in our transitional program, the woman at the desk explained. He's quiet, observant, doesn't speak much about his past, but he's respectful. Curious. Does he know we're coming? Sophia asked, her voice cracking. Not yet, the woman said gently. We wanted to give you the choice of how to approach him. Alexander glanced at Sophia, then at Lila. I think we tell him the truth. Minutes later, they stood just outside a quiet reading room. Through the glass, Leo sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping slowly through a picture book. He had thick, dark hair and sharp eyes that scanned the pages carefully, as though memorizing each line. Even at a distance, Sophia could see it, the curve of his brow, the dimple in his cheek, the way his lips pursed in focus. Her heart lurched. Lila clung to her side. That's him? Yes, Sophia whispered. The staff member knocked softly on the door. Leo, she said, stepping inside. There's someone here to see you. The boy looked up, his expression guarded. Sophia stepped forward first, her hands trembling. Hi, Leo. My name is Sophia. I think you might remember me. You were just a baby when I had to leave you, but I'm your mother. Leo's eyes widened, but he didn't speak. Lila stepped in next. I'm Lila. I'm your sister. Leo looked between them, stunned. For a long moment, silence stretched the room. Then, slowly, he stood and walked toward them. Sophia dropped to her knees as he approached. She barely breathed. Leo stopped in front of her, searching her face. Are you really my mum? He asked softly. Tears filled her eyes. Yes, baby. I never stopped loving you, not for a second. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. Sophia sobbed into his shoulder, clinging to him as if the past 10 years could be folded into this one embrace. And Lila, wiping her eyes, whispered, "Welcome home, Leo." That night, back at a private guest house Alexander had secured near the facility, the reunited family sat together for dinner. It was simple: grilled chicken, rice, vegetables, but to Leo, it tasted like something magical. He hadn't said much since the reunion, but his eyes followed every word, every gesture. He was soaking it in, trying to make sense of it all. Alexander sat across the table, gently steering the conversation so it wasn't overwhelming. "Do you like books?" he asked Leo. The boy nodded. "I read all the time." "Then we're going to get you a library bigger than this whole house," Lila said, grinning at him, "and I'll let you borrow my favorites." Leo looked at her, unsure. "You want to share with me? You're my brother," she said matter-of-factly. "Of course I do." A flicker of emotion crossed his face, something between awe and disbelief. Sophia watched her children, still trying to convince herself this wasn't a dream. After dinner, she and Leo sat alone on the porch, the desert wind cooling the summer heat. "You really remembered me?" she asked him gently. "I remembered a song," he said quietly. "A lullaby. I didn't know where it came from. But when I saw you, it was like I knew." Sophia swallowed a sob. "I used to sing it to you every night." Leo nodded. "I sing it to myself when I can't sleep." She reached for his hand. "I'm sorry I wasn't there." "You came back," he said. "That's what matters." Inside, Alexander watched them through the glass doors, arms folded. Lila sat beside him, legs curled under her as she scrolled through her tablet. "Do you think he'll be happy with us?" she asked softly. "I think he already is," Alexander replied. "But it'll take time. We just have to let him know we're not going anywhere." Lila leaned her head against his shoulder. "You're really good at being a dad, you know." He smiled, his chest tightening. "I'm still learning." "But you'd do anything for us." "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Anything." Suddenly his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. A message from Martin. "Update. Dante escaped during a prison transfer. Suspected internal help. Authorities in pursuit." Alexander's blood turned cold. He stood up slowly, phone clenched in his hand. Lila looked up, confused. "What is it?" He forced a calm tone. "Just business. I need to make a call." But in his gut, he knew what it meant. Dante wasn't done. And now that they had Leo, the stakes were even higher. Alexander stood on the porch, the message from Martin burning in his hand like a lit fuse. The wind stirred dust across the empty drive, and in the quiet of the desert night, his instincts screamed louder than ever. Dante wouldn't just run. He'd come for what he lost. He dialed Martin immediately. "Tell me everything." "Transfer van was intercepted outside Albuquerque," Martin said. "2 guards dead, Reyes vanished. We've got local and federal agencies on alert, but he had help, likely planned for weeks." "Do we know where he's heading?" "Not yet. But if he knows about Leo," Alexander's voice turned steel, "then we bring them home, now." Inside the house, Sophia and Leo had curled up on the couch, the boy resting his head on her shoulder as she hummed softly, the lullaby he remembered. Lila sat beside them, drawing the 3 of them together in her notebook, adding stars in the background like they were a constellation finally reformed. Alexander entered with calm urgency. "Sophia, we have to go." She looked up, instantly reading the tension in his face. "What happened?" He crouched in front of Leo. "Buddy, I know you've been through a lot, and I promise I'll explain everything, but I need you to trust me, okay?" Leo nodded slowly. "Okay." They packed within minutes. The jet was already being fueled. As they drove through the dark, Alexander kept his eyes on the rearview mirror. Every pair of headlights made his shoulders tighten. Every shadow in the road felt like a warning. On board, he turned to Sophia and spoke low. "He'll come for them. For you. He might think Leo's still his leverage." "He's not," Sophia said fiercely. "Not anymore. Back in New Mexico, Dante stood in the ruins of the foster facility's outer perimeter, his clothes different, his hair cut short, but his posture unmistakable. A quiet man approached him. "They moved the boy," the man said. "Private jet, headed back east, but I've got people watching." Dante nodded slowly, cracking his knuckles. "Good. Let them settle in, think they're safe, then we take back control." His eyes narrowed, cold as steel. "I built that girl's fear. I know every nerve, every weakness. You can't just erase history." He walked away, vanishing into the dark. Meanwhile, the Quinn estate buzzed with quiet motion. Security teams doubled, cameras upgraded. Martin paced the perimeter with silent efficiency. But in the guest suite, Leo lay between his mother and sister, listening to their breathing, feeling the strange new warmth of being part of something. "Is this forever?" he asked. Sophia kissed his forehead. "As long as I'm breathing." Alexander stood at the doorway watching, but deep inside he knew Dante was coming, and next time it wouldn't be for money or files, it would be for revenge. A storm rolled over the city the next morning, grey clouds smothering the sky as rain traced long streaks down the estate's windows. Inside, the Quinn home was a hive of quiet movement. Security staff checked locks, reinforced gates, and reviewed surveillance footage on looping monitors. The children were kept close, tucked safely inside the walls of the house that had become a fortress. Sophia stood in the kitchen, stirring tea with a trembling hand. The air inside her chest was thinner these days. The doctors warned her to rest to avoid stress. But how could she, knowing the man she once feared most was somewhere out there, watching, waiting? Alexander walked in, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what it takes," he was saying. "I want eyes on every road into this city. If Dante Reyes so much as blinks, I want to know about it." He hung up, turning to Sophia. "We're ready as we can be." She nodded, trying to appear braver than she felt. "What about the kids?" "They're safe for now, but we need a long-term plan, one that ends this." She glanced toward the living room where Lila and Leo were curled up watching a movie. Lila had her arm protectively around her little brother, and Leo, still adjusting to a world where people didn't abandon him, looked up every few minutes just to make sure she was still there. "I don't want to run again," Sophia whispered. "I can't keep doing that to them." "You won't have to," Alexander said. "We stop him, for good." Meanwhile, across the city, in a forgotten corner of an industrial zone, Dante Reyes stood beneath the overhang of a dilapidated storage facility. Rain ran off the brim of his jacket as he stared at a table covered in maps and photos, a layout of the Quinn estate, shift schedules, entry points. His new accomplice, a former Quinn Enterprises contractor recently fired under suspicion of theft, leaned over the map. "If we take out power here," he said, pointing to a junction on the grid, "we can force them into backup mode, blind the cameras, create confusion." Dante smiled faintly. "Good. Confusion breeds mistakes, and mistakes open doors." "And once we're in?" the man asked. Dante's smile vanished. "I don't want the girl. I want Sophia." The man hesitated. "She's not the same woman you remember." "She doesn't need to be," Dante said coldly. "She just needs to see what happens when you try to build a new life on lies." Back at the estate, Martin returned from the perimeter check, rain dripping from his jacket. "All clear for now, but there's movement on the southern routes. Unmarked vans. Could be nothing. Could be him." Alexander nodded. "Keep them inside. Don't let them out of your sight." As thunder cracked over the lake, Lila turned from the couch and looked toward the hallway, her eyes narrowing. Did someone just walk past the back door? Sophia froze. Alexander reached for his weapon, and the storm began. The silence that followed Lila's question was sharp as glass. Alexander moved quickly, stepping into the hallway with his weapon drawn, eyes scanning every shadow. Rain lashed the windows, thunder growling above, but beneath the storm, something else stirred. The unmistakable tension of a predator closing in. "Martin!" Alexander barked into his radio. "Confirm South Door security, now!" "I'm on it," Martin's voice crackled back. Motion sensors just tripped, but there's no visual yet. Sophia gathered the children, her hands steady despite the fear in her chest. Lila, Leo, come with me. She led them to the inner den, a reinforced room designed in case of emergencies. Once they were inside, she pressed her palm to the biometric lock. The door sealed with a low hiss. Lila looked up. Is it really him? Sophia nodded, pulling them close. But this time he's not taking anything. Meanwhile, outside the southern gate, Dante crouched beneath the tall hedges, soaked but smiling. His men were already in motion, disabling cameras, placing jammers, preparing the timed blackout. He didn't need hours. He needed 3 minutes. Just enough to get inside, reach her, and make her remember everything she tried to erase. Inside, Alexander moved through the lower level like a phantom, every sense honed, every sound magnified. He passed the kitchen, empty, the library, untouched. But as he neared the side hallway leading toward the guest wing, he heard it. A soft creak, a single boot step. He pressed against the wall and waited. The figure moved closer, tall, fast, careful. Then, Alexander stepped out and slammed him against the wall, disarming him in one motion. "Not Dante," he growled, staring at the man's face. One of the fired contractors. The same face Martin had flagged 2 days earlier. "Where is he?" Alexander demanded. The man smirked through the pain. "Closer than you think." Martin's voice cut through the comms. "Alex, front gate breach. He's inside." Alexander turned, fury igniting his every muscle. "Secure the wing. I'm going after him." Upstairs, the reinforced den remained locked, but the sound of footsteps echoed faintly through the walls. Lila tensed. Leo clutched her hand. "Stay quiet," Sophia whispered, pressing her back against the wall. The lights flickered, then died. Everything went black. And then, a voice outside the door. Soft, mocking. "Sophia," her breath caught. "You thought you could run forever." She pulled Lila and Leo tighter. Dante's voice was calm, confident. "Open the door, or I'll open it for you." Inside the safe room, Leo whispered, "I'm scared." Sophia kissed his head. "I know, baby, but he's not getting in." Downstairs, Alexander moved with deadly precision through the darkness, relying on instinct and memory. He knew this house. Dante didn't. A silhouette appeared in the hallway, backlit by lightning. Alexander didn't hesitate. He raised his weapon. "Dante!" he roared. But the figure didn't stop. And when Alexander pulled the trigger, the bullet hit body, but not Dante. The man crumpled to the floor, groaning, clutching his side. Alexander rushed forward, recognizing him too late. Another one of Dante's hired thugs. He checked the pulse, still alive, but bleeding badly. No time to waste. He tore down the hall, stormlight flashing through the windows, illuminating fragments of the estate he had built to be unbreakable. And now, it had been breached. Upstairs, the secure room's door remained closed, but Dante wasn't rushing. He was savoring it. He paced slowly outside, dragging a knife across the wall, the metal singing softly against the surface. "Remember this sound, Sophia," he said, his voice almost tender. "I used to fix your locks after break-ins. You said you felt safer when I was around." Inside, Sophia held the children close. "You lied. You tricked me. I saved you," he hissed, "from being alone, from being weak. But then you left. You ran to Quinn. And now what? You think because he's rich he can protect you from your past?" Lila squeezed her mother's hand. "Don't listen to him." Sophia's eyes burned. "You were never my protector, Dante. You were the reason I was afraid." Outside, Dante stopped pacing. His voice shifted, cold, dangerous. "You're going to open this door, or I'm going to blow it off the hinges." He pulled something from his coat, a small-shaped charge, enough to breach reinforced steel. He began affixing it quietly to the lock. Downstairs, Martin's voice crackled in Alexander's earpiece. "We've got 3 down. South cameras back online. Dante's outside the panic room. "I'm on my way," Alexander shouted, sprinting up the stairwell. Inside the safe room, Sophia recognized the sound, the slow, deliberate beeping of a charge being armed. "No," she whispered. "No, no." She pulled the kids behind her, bracing them against the far wall. Lila clung to her brother, whispering, "It's going to be okay. Mum's here. Alex is coming." The beeping grew faster. Then, boom. The door blew inward in a cloud of smoke and sparks. Dante stepped through, coughing once but smiling. "There you are," he said, locking eyes with Sophia. She didn't move. "You're coming with me." "Over my dead body," she said. Dante raised the knife. "I was hoping you'd say that." But before he could take another step, a shot rang out. Dante froze. Then another shot fired, straight into his leg. He dropped the knife, collapsing to the floor. Behind him stood Alexander, smoke rising from his gun, face carved from stone. "I told you," he said, stepping into the smoke, "you're not touching my family." Dante writhed on the floor, clutching his bleeding leg, his eyes wide with shock and fury. "You think this changes anything?" he spat. "You think this is over?" Alexander didn't lower the weapon. "Oh, it's over." Sophia stepped between them, shielding Lila and Leo as Martin and two security agents stormed in behind Alexander, weapons raised, sweeping the space. "Clear," Martin called out. "We've got him." Two guards rushed to restrain Dante, securing his hands and dragging him to his knees. Blood pooled beneath him, mixing with the debris from the blast. The smoke had begun to clear, revealing the room in ruins, but the family untouched. Leo peeked out from behind Sophia. "Is he going to jail?" Alexander knelt beside him, his tone gentler now. "Yes, for a long time." Dante's laugh was bitter and broken. "You can lock me up, Quinn, but you'll never erase me. You think you've won because you've got the house and the money, because she picked you." Sophia stepped forward, fierce and shaking, her voice sharp as broken glass. "I didn't pick him, Dante. I chose freedom. I chose my children, something you never understood." Dante stared at her, his breath heavy, then his eyes flicked to Lila. "You have her eyes," he said. "But you'll learn the world isn't kind. It breaks girls like you." Lila stepped forward, chin lifted. "Maybe," she said, "but I'm not alone." That silenced him. Police arrived minutes later, called in by Martin's direct channel. Dante Reyes was cuffed, loaded into a reinforced van, and taken into federal custody. This time, there would be no escape. His crimes had multiplied. Kidnapping, attempted murder, conspiracy. The law would bury him. After the chaos, the family gathered in the kitchen. The rain had eased, but the air remained heavy. Leo sat at the table, dazed. "Is it really over?" Sophia ran her fingers through his hair. "Yes, baby, it is." Alexander stood by the window, watching as the last of the police cars pulled away. His arm was in a sling, strained from the recoil of the second shot, but his posture remained tall, unshaken. Lila tugged on his sleeve. "You saved us. Again." He knelt carefully. "You saved each other. I just helped a little." "No," she said, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You're my dad." The words struck deeper than anything else had that day. He held her close, heart swelling with something he hadn't allowed himself to feel for years. Peace. Later that night, as the house fell quiet and the power was fully restored, Sophia stepped into the backyard where Alexander stood beneath the stars. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "You?" She took his hand. "Getting there." They stood in silence, watching the wind stir the water of the lake. "Thank you," she said at last. He looked at her. "For what?" "For giving our kids a future, one not built on fear." He smiled softly. "And maybe one built on something more." Sophia didn't answer with words. She leaned in, resting her head on his shoulder. Above them, the storm had passed, and in the stillness, a new beginning was waiting. The following morning brought a golden sunrise, casting a warm glow over the estate and washing away the final remnants of the storm. Birds sang from the trees, and the lake shimmered as if the world itself had taken a deep, cleansing breath. Inside, the house felt different, not just safer, but lighter, like a burden had finally been lifted. In the kitchen, Lila was already up, making scrambled eggs with Leo beside her, carefully cracking eggs into a bowl while explaining the ratio of salt to butter like a seasoned chef. Sophia sat nearby, smiling as she sipped tea, her body still tired, but her heart finally beginning to heal. Alexander entered quietly, pausing in the doorway to take in the scene. His family, together, whole, safe. "Breakfast?" Lila asked, beaming. "I wouldn't miss it," he said, ruffling Leo's hair as he passed. As they all sat around the table, plates clinking and laughter rising in gentle waves, the silence between moments was filled not with dread but with comfort. "Do we have to go back to school soon?" Leo asked, mid-bite. Alexander chuckled. "Eventually. But I think you both deserve a little break." "Can we go to the beach?" Lila added. "Mom used to take me when I was little." Sophia smiled. "It's where I used to dream about the future." Alexander reached across the table, taking her hand. "Then maybe it's time we start building that dream." That afternoon, they visited the edge of the city, a stretch of coastline Alexander had purchased years ago but never used. It was private, untouched, waiting. As they walked barefoot in the sand, Sophia turned to him. "What will you do now, with the company?" He shrugged slightly. "Still run it, but differently, more time at home. Less chasing numbers, more chasing what matters." "You," he said, looking at her. "Lila. Leo." She nodded slowly. "They're going to need therapy. Healing. So will I. Whatever it takes," he promised. "We'll do it together." A soft breeze swept across the beach, and Lila and Leo raced ahead, laughing, chasing waves and forgetting for a moment the weight they had carried. As Sophia leaned against Alexander, she whispered, "I never thought I'd get to feel this." "You deserve it," he replied. "You all do." Behind them, the sun began to dip toward the horizon, and for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something they were building, together. And in a small, quiet foster home hundreds of miles away, another boy sat at a desk, opening a letter. Inside, a photo. Leo, Lila, and Sophia. And a note, "There's a place for you two when you're ready, we'll be waiting." The boy smiled. Family wasn't always blood, but it always came home.